Welcome to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to us. Before we get started, let's go around the room, have everyone introduce themselves, and I'll go ahead and start with you, Jeff.
I'm Jeff Adams. I am an author of both gay romance as well as young adult fiction featuring LGBTQ characters, and I'm also co-host of the Big Gay Fiction podcast.
Perfect. Stacey.
Hi, my name is Stacey Agdern. I write contemporary romance featuring Jewish characters, and I am a very happy romance reader and writer. So.
All right, and Leanna.
Hello, I am Leanna Renee Hieber, and I write gothic gas lamp fantasy, so fantasy that's set in the Victorian era, mostly. However, I'm currently doing a series that's set in multiple timelines at the same time. So I like to I sort of like to time travel in my work. Let's put it that way. So I'm thrilled to be here, and happy Pride, everybody.
Perfect.
Yes,
so
happy Pride.
Let's go ahead and jump right in to the first question. I'll start with you, Stacey. Tell us a little bit about your new release and where did the idea come from?
So History of Us, I'll show you the cover, the bookmark, comes out on Thursday, the 24th of June. It's the second book in my Friendships and Festival series. It was inspired by two fundamentally different ideas. The first was one of my favorite romance tropes is the idea of the impossible relationship. I love this idea of people who meet and then somehow manage to stay together despite all of the obstacles that try to throw them apart. Examples of this can be found in Evelyn Vaughn's Bombshells, aka Goddess and Her Kind of Trouble, Kelly Armstrong's A Stitch in Time, the first book in Tracy Livesey's Girls Trip series, as well as Heart of Obsidian by Nalini Singh. This is my attempt. I've loved them for a long time. This is my attempt to write one. And the second thing is learning about the story behind Oheka Castle. Oheka Castle is a property on Long Island that was built by a guy by the name of Otto Kahn, whose house was burned down in New Jersey in the 19 teens because of anti-Semitism. He left New Jersey because of anti-Semitism and built this beautiful castle on Long Island that was fireproof. And when I heard about this story and how it sat on the opposite side of the stories that I had heard about in terms of history of Jewish people, it sort of sparked something in me, this idea of wanting to put certain Jewish stories back into the narrative and thinking about the kind of stories of Jews that we know and the kinds of stories we don't. And you put those two elements together and you have the spark of what History of Us is.
Perfect. Leanna.
So Time Immemorial is my latest release, and it is out. The first installment in what will be a trilogy of novellas is out as we speak at Scribd. So that's SCRIBD. So scribd.com. It's only available there in digital as well as audiobook. And I am doing the narrating. So I'm very, very thrilled to do that. And Scribd has a free trial. So you can try Scribd for 30 days for free. You can check out Time Immemorial. It's a quick read. What it's about is a woman who's living her past lives in the present. She lives in 4 timelines at the same time. And she's living in Iron Age Britain as a druidic priestess. She's living in the 19th century as an explorer and a scientist interested in the stars. In World War II, she's fighting Nazis in London as part of the Women's Royal Air Force. And in the 24th century, she's a starship captain. So this idea happened because my business partner, Tom Truelove, and I had been approached to write a TV script in a Star Trek vein. And so Captain Liz Marlowe started out as a Starship Captain TV character, but we knew that she had this interesting, unique relationship with time. That project as a TV script didn't end up going anywhere. The production company we were working with, it just kind of fell apart, as a lot of TV things often do. It's a tough business. But we love the character so much that we knew that we needed to work with the character. We wanted to take her and put her into other things. And so her timelines were already aligning with some of the timelines that I already write. So I just started sliding Liz into my worlds, my existing worlds. I had this sort of Doctor Who-like character who would kind of pop in and pop out of a situation in the Eternophiles, my gothic gaslamp fantasy trilogy with Tor. And so she became the visitor in that series. And I already had a futuristic series called the Dark Nest universe. And here's where it's really wonderful that Stacey and I are on this panel together, because Stacey was outside at a cafe with me and our dear friend Isabeau Kelly, a fellow writer, when we were sort of challenging each other and kind of daring each other to write different things. And so I had been, so adamant that I would only write things in the 19th century because that's my time period and I love it. And and Isabeau and Stacey were like, yeah, but you really love Star Trek. Okay, you really, and so they were teasing me about all the things, all of this futuristic space opera stuff that I love. And so I sort of got triple dog dared to write a futuristic story. And I'm so glad that I did, because it became my first piece of published fiction. My first piece of professional, traditionally published fiction was called Dark Nest. And so that's set in the future. And so Liz's Starship Captain self fit right in seamlessly into my Dark Nest universe. Now, you don't have to have read the Dark Nest books or any of my work to jump into Time Immemorial. It stands completely on its own. However, it does fit into the broader Hieberverse. All of my work does cross over from characters go from one series to the next. Each of the series are separate, they're their own distinct creatures. But if you are a fan of my work, you will recognize that you'll see a character from another series that will pop in to the other one. And so Liz, through her iterations through time, it's been really fun to work with her. And because she was a character that I had originally intended on playing as in a TV script, it's been great to narrate her audiobooks, because I still get to play her. I still get to, her demanding and forthright nature. She's a real character, and she's got a lot of sudden emergencies in her life, because in all 4 of her timelines, someone is trying to kill her in each of them. So just getting a chance to bring her to life, it was a very long road to her publication, but I'm really, really glad it's out there. And the rest of the novella series are going to come out from now into July.
All right, perfect. Jeff?
So I'm looking at a whole series here, because I am rapid releasing a series. I've got the 4 books in the Codename Winger series. These have been releasing since June 1st. Books 1 and 2 are already out. The 3rd book is coming out June 29th, and the 4th book is coming out July 13th. The ebooks and the ebooks and the paperbacks drop on time, and the audiobooks work their way out over time as audiobooks work their way out. But I'm also selling them direct on my site, so you can pick them up same day and get them cheaper than you can anywhere else. And you can find all that information at codenamewinger.com for that, which is the name of the entire series. This series looks at the year in the life of high school student Theo Reese. He is a hockey player, but he's also a crazy genius with computers. And since he was 11 and discovered that his parents work for this covert agency because he hacked their phones to figure it out, the agency hired him to work on their tech as well. And suddenly, as he's kicking off his junior year of high school, the agency's tracking system for the agents has been compromised. And he goes from trying to work on that, with the IT team, to ending up getting abducted at one point because he's got a chip he doesn't know about. And also his dad gets abducted. And so now he really is taking the whole thing personally because his dad has been captured. So he's got to come out from behind his keyboard and go into the field for the very first time to, try to solve this problem alongside the rest of the agency. And From there, in book 2, which jumps forward to just after the holiday break, he's doing something as innocent as going to a computer science competition to work with his school's team, but it turns out a file that he's been looking for with the agency, that somebody stole this encrypted key, turns up at the competition trying to get these kids to hack into it. And so now the mission has come to him when it was supposed to be a simple weekend, doing stuff that he can do in his sleep practically. The third book, Audio Assault, moves into summer vacation. He ends up going off with his family to help out a family friend and uncovers a whole big plot around he's actually working for somebody who owns a music distribution company, has, a record label. That would be the right word, a record label. And it turns out that somebody is manipulating their system to embed technology and code into song files, so it not only strips the information off of your phone for identity theft, but it can also emit a tone that can make you potentially into a raging homicidal maniac. So now he's got a race to kind of help everybody fix that problem. And then in the fourth and final book, Netminder, everything kind of just blows up. And very early in the book, he ends up on the run, cut off from the agency and cut off from everybody. And he's trying to be coerced by some people he's met up in the previous books to join them to help take over and control the internet. So basically a year in the life, because that fourth book takes place at the top of his senior year in high school. So that is the Codename Winger series. And to pick up the question on where the inspiration came from, in just a wild kind of scenario, I was actually at a gay romance convention to talk about all the books that I write on in that genre. Somewhere in that hotel, and I never figured out if it was somebody with the convention itself or just somebody else in the hotel, but somebody had a ringtone on their phone that was the same as the Kim Possible Communicator, if anybody remembers that Disney show from in the 2000s. I adored that show. I loved her, that she could just take on the world and also be this regular high school student at the same time, and kind of taking that idea with, things that I love from movies like Tron and Hackers, plus some of the spy stories, especially Kingsman, where they had that young kid that they brought in to Kingsman so early. It's like, by the time I left that convention on the plane home, I had the prologue to this book that was Theo's backstory. And it stayed by and large from its first draft because that just put him on the page so well.
Perfect. So my next question, I'll start with you, Leanna. Was there a part in the whole process of this story where it took you out of your comfort zone, and how did it impact you as a writer?
That's a great question. Yes, because this is an ambitious thing that I was trying, writing in multiple timelines where the only clue that the reader has that you're going from one timeline to the next is I say 1882 at the top of the chapter, or I say Iron Age Britain, or I say World War II. And I think the shifting in and out of Liz at any given moment, she is living in these multiple consciousness. She can kind of shift from one to the next if she concentrates, but basically the priority of each life, the hierarchy of needs kicks in, because if she's under duress in one particular life, she needs all of her focus there. And the other lives, she kind of goes into a bit of autopilot. She's still living her life, but just the foreground of her consciousness is in the life that needs her most in those moments. There is a time when all of the lives coalesce together, sort of a fifth life, Mad Liz, where everyone can kind of hear everyone. And it's cacophonous and very strange to anyone outside of Liz's brain. Hard for her, let alone anyone else. So I think just trying to make that clear that it's a time slip. You're slipping from one time to the next. I think I really initially got a bit overwhelmed of how in the world do I tackle the idea of this woman living in all of these time periods. But I've always been drawn to a sense of past lives. So I just wanted to think about what if you're living your past lives at the same time. And so I think just being very specific and in the moment with her, not thinking about how everything would work, because we're not covering every part of her life in this story. We're covering the revelation that not only is someone trying to kill her, but is trying to wipe out the entire psychically augmented population. So folks who, in my futuristic setting, the psychically augmented are those who are the next stage of human evolution. And they're very, very psychically gifted, and they are being persecuted. And so Liz does not operate like the other psychically augmented people that she's met, but she's well aware that she would be targeted as an other. And so, you know, this obviously paralleling with World War II and other, you know, tales of genocide. That's what's happening in the far future for this group, the psychically augmented. And I'm wanting to be in the moment with her in these big, huge, epic, life-threatening scenarios, but also just not being so overwhelmed by that it shuts me down. I have to think my way through that like she does. So it's sort of one foot in front of the other, and trying not to tackle any of the world's problems beyond the ones that are her immediate problems. She's trying to shoot down a Nazi, Messerschmitt, when she's in World War II. She's trying to outrun the Romans who are coming to kill the Druids, and she's trying to outsmart a gentleman who doesn't know why he's trying to kill her in the 19th century, but he is, because he's the past life of the villain. So, you know, I suppose just the enormity of it, I just tried to sort of lean into, well, I'm just going to do my best. And my editor, Julia O'Connell, really helped, hone in on, if I was going far afield, just getting back to those immediate needs, those immediate moments. And then just trying to, you know, break this down into 3 novella-sized chunks. I really I couldn't let myself get lost in the weeds about it. It really had to be, these are the most perilous moments of this woman's life, and we are going to be there with her through them. And she doesn't think she needs help, but she's going to realize she needs help. And so it's also about her finding community. So I think when I was getting overwhelmed, I do what I often do, which is turn to my characters and let them help me out, because I have a wealth of characters who I've built through all of my 13 books, and they layer on one another, and they're able to help me when I feel like I have, you know, sort of written myself into a corner. I have a lot of very helpful people with some really unique supernatural gifts, which help a lot when you're in when you've gotten yourself into a situation. You're like, how am I going to get out of this? Oh, right. Yes, that person's telekinetic. Fantastic. So it's just, sometimes your world building ends up saving you in more ways than one.
All right, perfect. Jeff, how about you?
I think for me, the thing that was the hardest to find the right balance for was the fact that Theo is super smart and can operate in some levels as an adult, but he's also a teenager. And, you know, sometimes his emotional depth is as a 16 or 17-year-old. And there are those moments, you know, where he's engaged trying to do, in a tense situation, do what needs to be done for the job, but maybe he really wants a hug from mom or dad at the same time. And how he'll, you know, beat himself up occasionally, like, I need to be the agent right now, I can't do this other thing. And same thing with how he has to keep the secret from his friends and his boyfriend and everybody else. You know, it's singularly with him and, you know, his parent and the tight core he's got around him with the agency to know who he is, while he can't share it with anybody else. I mean, to everybody else, he's a computer consultant, you know, but that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what he really does, and he can't share any of it. And finding the balances there, I had a good team too, because I had a terrific developmental editor who helped me find some of the places to let him crack a little bit. And, you know, as the writer and Theo's the hero, I want him to always succeed. But if he always succeeds at every turn, it becomes very boring really fast. So it was finding the right beats to let him fail and to have the setback and to, be able to regroup from it and grow. Because that ended up one of the things that I struggled with for a while, but then got it figured out, was the growth arc through the books. It's the nice thing about having that relatively tight timeline of running a year through the books, and each book itself, probably the longest run, only runs over maybe the course of a couple weeks, is to show that growth book to book to book for him, from where he started out as a pretty strong character to really developing into something much more when he comes out on the other side of book 4.
All right. Perfect. Stacey.
So interesting that I'm the one who's talking last, because my answer actually sort of sits in the middle between the two of them. So History of Us is the second book in the series. The first one, Miracles and Menorahs, is a lovely, wonderful little Hanukkah book. It's a great story, but it's so happy and so wonderful. History of Us is different. History of Us is the story of Anna, who is our female main character in our first book, Sarah's best friend, and her second chance, or I think the best way to describe it is the sort of like last chance with, it's a childhood sweetheart, turn lover, turn second chance, turn third chance, or can we please figure this out with our main male character in the story. His name is Jacob. And Jacob is the character who I struggled with the most in a lot of ways, mostly because what I decided to do is I decided to write a Jewish billionaire main character and turn him into a hero. And so in a lot of ways, the things that people talk about and think about in conjunction with billionaire characters, the things that certain readers want out of billionaires, jump up against anti-Semitic stereotypes. So literally, like, I was in this lovely little dance of, how do I do this? How do I do it this? How do I answer the questions that billionaires, that readers want out of billionaires in a way that I can safely write about in this story? And so what I came up with was this idea of tikkun olam, which is the Jewish American idea of making the world better. And literally that is this guy's driving principle. Completely, absolutely, and utterly driving principle. Everything he does, he overworks himself. He's exhausted as an adult. It's constant. And like, again, he's dealing with the same question, Jeff, that your main character is dealing with, this idea of like, he can't be perfect. He thinks he has to be. Because of course, if he doesn't, like in his head, he thinks that if he's not perfect, he's going to be, burned in effigy 90% of the time. So like my editor, Julie Sturgeon, was fantastic, because like literally letting myself be like, okay, he can have a moment. He needs a moment where he is emotionally sort of open with someone who is not the female main character. Like, it's okay to have that moment. It's okay to break emotionally. It's okay to not be perfect. And so you set this story up against the first one, where the ensemble cast isn't as, the emotional journeys aren't as deep because of the issues that I'm dealing with in this book. So like, it's literally the balance between, how do I keep the series the same tonally between the first book and the second book? And how do I show the growth of these characters through their relationship? How do I make it possible and clear and balanced in a situation where I'm dealing with these sort of larger questions of, Jewish stereotypes and history and all of that kind of stuff. So it's, as I said, a very huge and deep balance for me.
Yeah, perfect. So next question for you, Jeff, is what's something about being a published author that surprised you?
It never gets easier.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I mean, you could borrow the answer too if you want. Just put a different spin on it. It gets somewhat easier to maybe come up with the idea or to write the basics of the book, because you start to fall into you understand the craft more, and that all builds. But the process of getting the writing done and getting the editing done and getting everything ready to publish and go to market and all of this stuff, it never gets easier. You would expect at some point, and I mean, we always hear that it doesn't change, but I think everybody expects the idea of the imposter syndrome at some point to not be as severe. But it's always there. Like, I'll read a book. It's like, well, why am I writing? Because this book is so amazingly wonderful. Why am I doing this at all? And that part never changes. And I think you always think it will. I know it won't. But there's that part in the back of your brain that goes, this will get easier. And it doesn't, because so much of the creative process is a mental game in and of itself to keep going. It never changes.
Stacey.
So there are a couple of things. I think I initially learned to throw my expectations out the window once I realized how completely different my path was going to be than what I expected it to be in the first place. I mean, Leanna knows this all too well. The very last thing I expected was to have my first traditionally published book to be a Hanukkah story. Like last thing ever. So I think what surprised me is how much you learn about so many different things as you are being published, not just about yourself, but about the community, like what, and also like how to market the book, how to do all of the things that like will make your process easier, and how easily it becomes a storehouse of knowledge that you have. I never thought that I would be able to lean into different aspects of promotion as well as, or as not so well as I have, or, and I think you have to be, so I guess it goes back to the beginning where like this idea of like not having any expectations at all is the best idea. Like, yes, you'll have, these things will all happen, but like for the positive or for anything, like nothing ever goes as planned ever. And I think the more that I sort of lean into that concept, the better I am at being published,
I think I'm going to adopt that for myself. I like that.
All right, Leanna.
Well, echoing definitely everything that my colleagues here have said. It's all so true. And, I think in some ways too, it doesn't get easier if you're focusing on your craft. It shouldn't get easier because you're still trying to push yourself too. And so that's a good thing about it not getting easier is trying to examine, all right, what are my pitfalls? How can I avoid them going into this next thing? But I think just how publishing has changed. I mean, I am, a traditionally published writer, and I have enjoyed that because I come from a theater background, and I really kind of need a cast of people to kind of keep me honest. I really need a team of people that together we're going to get together and put on a show that is this book. So I really need that because I need those external things. I need those external markers. But there's a lot about that though. The drawback is that there's so much that's out of your control. So I've been published with so many different publishers, and the formats have changed from one to the next, and I'm just trying to adapt and just trying to make sure as much of my work is out as broadly as possible. I have a niche genre, so it's also one of those things where, okay, what publishing house is going to take this unique story about a lady living in 4 timelines at the same time, and so in some cases, sometimes it's, finding the right house that's willing to take a chance on something too. And it didn't really occur to me until someone asked on Twitter, why isn't this available at Amazon? And I'm like, oh, well, because this is actually site specific. And so this was my first encounter with, working with Scribed. I've had a great experience with my editors, the top brass that I worked with. It's been a great experience all around. But, I don't have control over how the book is distributed. It's an exclusive to the Scribed platform. So, you can find it there in digital and you can find it there in audio, but you have to be a member of that site to access it. And it just, I guess in some ways, realizing that, oh, wait, I have to maybe be a little more specific for folks about where they can find it. Because I think sometimes, a lot of these new sites are going with exclusives. And that's also going to be the same when I work with Realm. I have a novella coming out with Realm FM that's doing podcasts. They'll have the text on their website, but then their marketing really is driving folks to listen to the story. And so that's going to also be site specific, but it's going to be available wherever there are podcasts. So it's podcast specific. So, these different distribution channels, I'm just excited to have my work out there in different formats and in different ways, and kind of seeing as publishing changes, okay, great. I want to say yes to different formats and different exclusives. Okay, great. Sure. I'm still also traditionally publishing. I'll have a nonfiction book out with Kensington next year about women ghosts. And so in that, that's going to be in brick and mortar stores in a way that my current work is not. And I'm trying not to sort of say one is better than the other. Really, for me, what's best is just being published and getting a paycheck. Let's be real. I mean, not that it's a lot of money or not that it's glamorous, but like it is a job. This is my full-time job. And I love what I do. And so a lot of that is then just learning how to be flexible about, okay, if you really want to stay published, going where you can get contracts and going where their contracts are and trying to double up. I mean, I'm working with 3 different publishers at the same time right now, making sure I don't drop any of the plates I'm spinning. Because, that's another thing too, is that I've learned about publishing is like, I really don't know how to say no, because I think I'm a little afraid to say no because, as an artist, you always want the work, but a healthy balance of that, I don't know. What's that like? At least I love what I do. That's the thing. I'm passionate about what I do. And I don't have a moment where I don't love what I do. It's hard. And there are moments when I'm like, why am I doing this? I still love it. Like, wait, why? Why are we doing this? But my love for it isn't ever in question, even when it's really, really hard. But so it's all of these things that you've heard here, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary folks. It's all of the things.
Perfect. So the next question, hopefully a little easier. And we'll start with you, Stacey. What do you do to research, either for this book or normally?
So a little bit of everything, Google searches, library searches. It's actually kind of interesting because a lot of the places that I wrote about in History of Us are actually places that I visited. I engaged in a lot of creative world building because I had to sort of retrofit the town that I was writing in once I couldn't get to visit some of the people that I wanted to visit. So I also used there are a lot of different places that were fantastic about putting their collections and walking tours of their sites online so that I could get the feel of, for example, Hika Castle online. I could get the feeling of walking in Huntington, or I could, on Long Island, or I could get I could get the map, I could get the menu that Byron Pies was serving that day. So I could be somewhat realistic about what my characters were going to eat. you know, but I also do a lot of world building. Because the first book in the series centered around a Hanukkah festival, I was already writing in an alternate universe because, of course, I have never seen a Hanukkah festival. I've never actually been to a Hanukkah festival. So, like, needless to say, like, stepping slightly out of the bounds of what we know as contemporary was fine because I was already in an alternate universe. So, like, creating a town that was half Huntington, half Briarcliff Manor was totally fine. You know, sort of, and I was able to kind of move with, you know, the times, but also I was able to talk to some really cool people. Steve Ammendown, who is an archivist and librarian and who is brilliant, sat and talked with me for a little bit. Amy Jo Cousins, who at the time was working for the Young Center, talked to me about a lot of what she did and what those conversations informed a lot of what Jacob does in the book. Also, I was able to sit down with Lydia San Andres, who at the time was studying museum curation, and I got to talk to her and about sort of what her schooling was like. So I was able to and what she was studying. So I was able to get a lot of that for Anna, who is an assistant museum curator. And then I also was able to spend some time back in November at the Center for Jewish History, which is an amazing, I don't want to call it a museum, because what it is a repository for 5 different cultural archives in one place. And so there are tons of exhibits all over the place, but it's not necessarily one sort of fundamental huge thing. YIVO, the Leo Baeck Institute, there's a yeshiva exhibit, and then there are 2 other different exhibits whose names I cannot remember. One is Sephardic specific, and one I think is MENA related, but they're all sort of very culturally specific Jewish archives, and they're fantastic. And so that was amazing and sort of very informative. And then, of course, I absolutely gave some time to the book that started all of my thoughts about this, which was Stephen Birmingham's Our Crowd, that talked about the German Jewish elite in the Gilded Age. So,
which was a huge, incredible population, and New York owed so much cultural heritage to those folks. So yeah, absolutely. No,
yes, and it was kind of amazing, and it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book in the first place, was that I had not seen, aside from the amazing Felicia Grossman's True It series, I had seen very much of that period in New York, or in the United, the Gilded Age Jews in New York. So, but I realized I was I don't write historical, so so I did it through a connection with Jacob, who is my main male character in this book. So
perfect. Leanna.
This was interesting to try to attempt, because there is no way you can there's absolutely no way you can research Druids, because nothing is left. Anything that we think we know about Druids is because Victorians were making shit up. So, and with lots of love, but completely pulling it out of their wild imaginations. So I basically just kind of kept it very simple, but also kept it very inclusive too. There's very strong female relationships in my Druidic time. My priestesses, they're also, I have a situation where one of them is a lover of another. So it's also a very inclusive. I think when we think about history, and especially far history, we think of this idea of there being a some kind of gender roles being really ratcheted down. We don't know that. We have no idea. And, and again, queer folks didn't just become invented in the modern era. Folks have always been around. All kinds of people and all kinds of identities have always been around. So I wanted to be, because I have non-binary characters in my far future, I also wanted to make sure that there was an inclusive kind of relationships in my past as well, because again, there's nothing to say otherwise. And there's a lot of stuff that's gotten erased through history that shouldn't have gotten erased through history. So that for me was kind of fun, of like trying to have a simple technological life, but a rich mysticism and really, really deep connections between my characters. The World War II life, that needed some research, but thankfully my business partner and the co-creator of Liz Marlowe as a character, Tom Truelove, he is a World War II RAF expert. So I'd be like, hey, what plane would Liz be flying and know how to fly and access? Because women weren't technically allowed on any combat missions, but I need an armed plane. So having a recon plane, like, that would have been taken out for photography missions, reconnaissance missions, having one that was armed would not have been completely beyond the pale. So she goes out in that one because she knows how to fly that one, because she's gone and done recon photography. She just needs one that's armed because she's Nazi hunting. So, and I feel like, sometimes outsourcing the research, to someone else is like very helpful, especially when I'm like, I have too many timelines at once. My far future, I can kind of make it up as I went along. And thankfully, I already had done a lot of that world building work on the Dark Nest universe. And so Liz just fits in to, my Dark Nest population, who is in a time of crisis. So everybody's having like their worst day. And so Liz is just trying to get through everybody's worst day together and try to keep herself intact and other people that she cares about through time. So I think, in some ways, the research is also, write the things you want to write about. And then research ends up being, filling in certain blanks. But, this is a fantastical premise that I have. So, if something wasn't exactly correct, I wasn't going to sweat it as much, because, Liz was already breaking the rules with taking out an armed plane in the first place. She just happens to have a connection in the Royal Air Force, a guy who helps her out, because he trusts and believes her and thinks that women should be able to run a combat mission if they're trained, if they're suited for it, if they're good at it. Kind of thing. So I think too, like finding allies through time too has been an interesting and important part of all of my work, because I try to always have diversity in everything that I do, because it's just more realistic, really, if you think about it, through all of time. Like there are all kinds of people out there, and you are around folks all the time. So making that a part of your mission, I think for me, that's just that kind of folded into this. And so I don't feel like I had to reach for any of that. That was just sort of there. But definitely needing to, there's a few things that I'm like, okay, it's the London Blitz. If I get this wrong, it's disrespectful to history. So I need to know, what types of planes and what type of bomb would be being dropped and those kinds of things. Because that's for me a matter of respect of folks who went through those struggles. So because that's able to be known. I don't exactly know how the Druids died exactly by Roman hands, but we have a sense of what their, we do have a sense of what the technology was. So it really, there's a lot of fire. So, but yeah, I think it's for me, I tried to balance having enough details to make you feel like you're immersed in these different time periods, and then not letting my worry over the details overwhelm my ability to finish the story.
Perfect. Jeff.
So my challenge here, because so much of this is kind of based in tech, was to not make the tech either boring or overwrought or like, my God, make the tech stop. So my day job's on the internet. It has been for like almost 20 years now. So I understand some of the basics. I'm not a developer or anything like that, but I kind of know how to go look up what I want to know. So there's a rooting for, especially some of the hacking stuff, in a little bit of reality, but it's all kind of tilted towards Theo's point of view while he's actually, you know, engaged in a hacking job. And so he's not going to be all, you know, extremely overthinking what he's doing. He's just going to do it. And these books are all in his POV. So it's all his, you know, run of thought as he's doing it. And I make a comment in one of the books. One of his obsessions is the 1982 movie, I think it is, Tron. And he when he's hacking, he views the world as what it looked like in that movie, even though that was just like not the thing, right? So, but that's kind of where he sees this. So it's put through that lens and just trying to get things accomplished without getting bogged down. Even if we're spending a few pages while he's hacking something, it's got to be somehow interesting enough to keep moving forward without going, my God, can we just get this done? And then with like the gadgets that I introduce and the gadgets that he works on and the gadgets the agency uses, I try to think of this in like similar to how the James Bond movies handle it. Because those movies, you know, take place in the present day of when they're, you know, when they're released, you know, whether they're in the 60s or in the now, they kind of take place in present time. And you had to rely on Q selling whatever he was dishing out to Bond as the gadget that would work like he said it would in this time frame. And I kind of keep that very same idea here, that if I say the iPhone's going to do this because the agency made it do it, I have to sell you on that really quickly, that you're not going to go, really? You know? And so that was a bit of a fun challenge to kind of come up with some of this stuff, root some of it in reality, but then make some of it kind of, you know, the just out of touch, you know, maybe 2022, 2023 reality where some of this stuff might happen. But then also, even with some of the hacking stuff, in the computer science competition book in Schooled, there's some stuff that we find out about one of Theo's mentors at the agency who's really into encryption, but also really into music. And I talk a little bit about the mathematics behind music and how those mathematics this particular person was using as some of the basis for the encryption that they did. So kind of moving from one to the other. And I read some fascinating articles and understood as much as I could, since I'm not a math person, but you know, how math is rooted in music a little bit, how it all kind of ties together. And so that helped create this interesting side character and give Theo some other stuff to think about, and a little more rooted in reality. So it was an interesting bit of like, you know, research to get what I needed to, because I don't want somebody who might know computers more than I do to go, well, this is just totally wrong, you know, but also to keep people moving along who don't know the tech. So it was kind of that balance of things. And then there was just random research of making sure I was putting Theo in the right spots. He lives in Boston, and I needed him to be able to go from where he lives. He's a cyclist because he hates to drive. And, you know, where could I get him to cycle from school, you know, from home to his high school? But then he also takes classes at MIT in the afternoon. So I needed to put all of that near enough to MIT where it wasn't going to be ridiculous for him to do that. But then occasionally I needed things to happen on that commute too. So what did that look like? But Google probably thinks like, what are you doing? You've got all these pins dropped all over Boston.
Yeah. It's like me with
What does all
Long
that
Island.
mean? Exactly. And same thing, you know, when I had to put him on the run in book 4, it's like, here's home. How far can he get from home in X amount of time? You know, and if he's there, well, then what does that mean later? So that, you know, if anybody was trying to follow along, they'd be like, oh, I see kind of where that all went. So it was a weird combination of research to kind of, you know, piece all that together and, you know, make something hopefully that holds together over 4 books.
All right, perfect. Well, that's all the time we've got for the day. So before we go, though, go around again, let everyone know where they can find you and your book. So we'll do you, Leanna, even though we know where your book is.
So Time Immemorial, Scribed. So that's scribd.com. And you can get this digitally as well as the audiobook. Get the audiobook because I'm doing the narration and it's really, I love it and I had a blast. And so I hope you'll enjoy it. All about me and my work at my website. So leannarenehieber.com. I am most active on social media on Twitter at Leanna Renee, and also sometimes on Instagram at my full name. I'm very rarely on Facebook, so don't try me there. But follow me on Twitter. That is where you will find me most. But yeah, my website has information about the whole Heberverse.
All right, perfect. Jeff.
So it's the Codename Winger books. All 4 books will be out by July 13th. The ebooks and the paperbacks are available wherever you buy books. The audiobooks will be rolling out to everywhere over time. Hopefully they'll all be out by the end of July, narrated by the wonderful Kurt Graves. You can find out all about this series at codenamewinger.com, and you can find all about me and the rest of my books at jeffadamswrites.com.
Perfect. And Stacey.
So History of Us, it comes out from Two Leaf Publishing on the 24th of June. You can find it wherever books are sold, both in print and an ebook. But I want to give a special shout out to the Rip Bodice in Los Angeles and Love Sweet Hour in Chicago. If you buy it from there, you will get one of these beautiful stickers designed by Jordan Dabney of the Not a Fan store. And if you go to bookshop.org, I want to send out some love to Transom Bookstores, which will be opening in my tiny little small town located just north of New York City in October. If you want to find me, I am most active socially on Twitter at NYStacey, or Instagram at last name S Agdern, Sagdern. I do have an author Facebook page, but you're probably more likely to find me on either Instagram or Twitter. My website is staceyagdern.com. And if you are interested, you can also find links to find me at Spotify. I have 20 million playlists. Each book I write gets a playlist. So if you're interested in music in that way, you can find me there as well.
All right, perfect. I want to thank all of you for joining us and everyone for watching. So see you next time.